Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Or should I say welcome for the first time this week to, oh my goodness, sorry. Let me just adjust you slightly. One day, I will have a setup where nothing has to be moved or changed. It just stays the way it is so that I can go live. But it doesn't work like that right now because this little space is an office, it's a studio, it's a study place, it's an everything space. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Sally Goodwin Ministries platform, which is a launch pad for Church Without Walls, for Egero Prophetic School, and for Activate Her. And it is so good to see you all on this wonderful Wednesday. It is this week's episode of Wisdom Wednesdays, and sincere apologies for not being live or going live, or however you should say it, on Monday morning. God has spoken quite clearly to me about putting aside periods of rest, periods of rest during this year of 2025. I'm not very good at resting generally, and he's spoken quite clearly about that. And so I've, in an attempt to be obedient, I, dutifully booked a little bit of time away. Wonderful, Vilna, welcome. A little bit of time away. Radiant Renilbe, good morning. Sort of over the weekend. Special Sonia, welcome, my lovely. And we went to stay in Mama Tessa, who most of you know. Radiant Roz, welcome. Has a beautiful space in Pearly Beach called Paradise at Pearly. And if any of you are looking to spend the weekend in Pearly Beach, please have a look. Go look it up on the internet. I think it's under bookings.com or something like that. Beautiful Brigitte, and you can book it there. But anyway, beautiful space, so we decided to go there. And our weekend started off with my middle boy having a car accident. So he had a car accident on Friday afternoon. We were on our way. We turned around and came back. He's okay. He's not hurt or anything, but obviously he's never had a car accident before. He was, quite kind of significant. Sylvia, welcome. Quite upset. He didn't know what to do, all the things. So we came back to help him with that. And then I went off, and then my wonderful husband was actually unwell for most of the weekend. So yes, the Lord and I need to have a conversation about what these restful periods actually look like, because it wasn't. So I hardly slept on Sunday night, and Monday morning I just was like, let me just try and get some sleep rather. So, but you all had an opportunity to listen to Emma's Word of the Lord in Scotland on Sunday, which was powerful and incredible and amazing. Gorgeous, cool, welcome. So that was definitely worthwhile. It was very, very powerful. And I'm so excited. Magnificent Melanie. I'm so excited for Emma's conference here in June. I'm so excited because when you listen, special Sylvia, welcome, gorgeous Claudia, welcome. When you listen to the prophecy that she released over Scotland at the end of her word on Sunday, and then you just imagine her releasing that over South Africa here, something similar to that, whatever she hears, obviously, in June. I am just so excited for that. We have a venue for those of you who contributed towards the deposit. Thank you so much. And we have a venue. It's in Brackenfell. You will get more details about that as we get closer to the opening up the ticket lines on Quicket. We are working towards getting that done as soon as possible. So that's very exciting. And then last week, Thursday, we had our very first Egero in-person prophetic school meeting for 2025, and it was amazing. I hope that the people, those wonderful people on here who were there at the Igera in-person meeting last week Thursday can also attest to the fact that it was amazing. God was so present in the room, and it was just incredible. So we were just very, very blessed by that. And this evening, drum roll if you please, this evening we have sorry, I'm just getting the lights positioned properly. This evening we have our very first inaugural meeting for Igera Online Prophetic School 2025. So I'm very excited for that as well. So we will be having our first meeting this morning, and that is just, not this morning, this evening, having our first meeting this evening. That is going to be so special. Special Simone, welcome, my lovely. Good morning to everybody that I didn't greet. Welcome to all of you, this fabulous community that make up this wonderful space. And it is so good to see you all on this week's episode of Wisdom Wednesday. And yes, I woke up to, I'm not sure, because where we stay in Cape Town, the suburb that we stay in Cape Town is often known to have its own climate. So I'm not sure what it's like where you live, but I woke up to a beautiful, cool, drizzly morning. So I'm very excited about that. Very excited about being cooler again, honestly. I don't love the dark, the darker later mornings and the darker earlier evenings. I don't love that. But I'm at this stage in my life, I don't know, menopause, post-menopause, whatever it is, I don't even know what it is. At this stage in my life where my internal thermometer seems to be set on boiling 24/7, I'm looking forward to cooler weather, really. I'm okay with cooler weather. So, okay, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Everybody that I didn't get to say hello to, welcome to all of you. Love you, sending blessings your way. Sometimes I don't know if it's just a glitch in the system or a meta issue, whatever it is, but sometimes all the comments come up, sometimes only some of the comments come up, sometimes none of the comments come up, sometimes I can see your names come up as you log on, sometimes I can't see your names come up. So if I didn't greet you personally, please don't be offended. It's a social media or a website or a internet or a something thing that I don't know how to correct that on my side. I don't even know whether it's possible to correct it on my side. Okay, so we are so on last week Friday, which was our last time that we saw each other, we spoke about the brand new Hebrew month of Adar, and we are in that brand new Hebrew month of Adar now as we speak. And the part of Jesus's life that I would like to speak about this morning is something that it's a story we all know, it's a story we all heard, it's a story we've probably all used as we have stood in faith for finances, specifically finances, but other things probably. And it is such a powerful story, such a powerful narrative of something that happened with Jesus when he was walking the earth. But at the same time, it's also so powerful prophetically for us wherever we are. So please, if you would love and share this broadcast, I would be so grateful. Thank you so much. Whether you share now while you're watching or whether you share afterwards, once it's done, I'm not too stressed. Oh, before we forget, because I had a question on I haven't been very good on social media the last few days. So if you've sent me things or WhatsApped me or messaged me things on social media, please excuse me if I haven't responded yet. But the journaling diary, a post went up about you getting a special price if you order directly from me. My social media people are just amazing. They're lovely. They do these things for me, because they love me and they are sowing into my ministry. And so they put these posts up, and sometimes I don't see them and I don't realize that they are, there. But the journaling diary, if you order directly from me, WhatsApp me, whatever you can do, order directly from me. They are going on special price of 200 Rand. You can get the journaling diary from me for 200 Rand. If you order directly from me, and my number is somewhere here on my Facebook pages. My number is there. So drop me a WhatsApp, order a journaling diary, and it's 200 Rand plus courier fees to wherever you are. But if you order more than one, courier fees are included. So there we go. Okay, so we are in the month of Adar. And the month of Adar, as we learned on Friday, if you didn't see Friday's broadcast, please go back and watch it so that you can catch up with where we are in the month of Adar. The month of Adar is a month of joy, it's a month of strength, it's a month of many, many things, all of them, most of them positive. But the one thing that we may not know about the month of Adar is this. So if we go to Matthew chapter 17, if we go to Matthew chapter 17, in Matthew chapter 17, verse 24, we come across this interesting story that is used. It's used to justify a lot of things, and I don't think that's what it was meant for. And we're going to go back. I'm going to read the story to you now. Then we're going to go back and just see what God is telling us in the story today, in this month of Adar specifically, okay? Because, the month of Adar, often for this particular year, it falls in exactly with our month of March. But it generally crosses February, March. And I find it so interesting that one of the points of the month of Adar is financial, and many companies, their financial year is February into March. I find it very interesting that this is the one of the stories that come out of the month of Adar. So it says, when they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the half shekel came to Peter and said, "Doesn't your rabbi pay the temple tax?" You can almost hear that self-righteous, religious, accusing voice. "Doesn't your rabbi pay the temple tax?" "Of course he does," said Peter. Peter, not ever wanting Jesus to be seen in any wrong kind of a viewpoint. When he arrived home, Jesus spoke first. And Jesus said, "Simon, what's your opinion?" So understand this. The collectors of the temple tax come to Peter, he's on his own, and say to him, "Does your rabbi pay the temple tax?" Peter says, "Of course." Peter then goes home. Before Peter has even opened his mouth to say, Jesus, this is the question I was asked. Jesus speaks first because he already knows. And he says, "Simon, what's your opinion?" The kings of the earth, leaders in other words, from whom do they collect duties and taxes? From their sons or from others? From others, Peter answers, because obviously as it's similar in the world today, it was similar in the world then, there is nothing new under the sun. The leaders and kings of the earth, as Jesus called them, when they were dishing out taxes and things, those who were close to them or those who were their sons, their children, they would exclude them from the tax space if necessary. And then, says Jesus, the sons are exempt. The sons are exempt. But to avoid offending others, go to the lake, throw out a line, and take the first fish you catch. Open its mouth, and you will find a shekel. Take it and give it to them for me and for you. Because the temple tax was half a shekel per person. So 1 shekel was sufficient for Jesus and for Peter. What is interesting about this particular story, with its emphasis on tax and its emphasis on supernatural provision from very unexpected places is that this story took place during the month of Adar. It was in the month of Adar that this story with the temple tax actually took place. So it just speaks loudly and clearly, prophetically to me, the fact that the month of Adar generally falls over our natural kind of financial year end in our Gregorian year. And it is this month of Adar when this whole conversation around the temple tax took place and where Jesus demonstrated supernatural provision. But I want to go into that story a little bit deeper this morning because there is actually so much more about that story that I think we don't necessarily realize. And I want to start actually by going back to Matthew chapter 16. So because, we often read these things on their own. We read them as kind of a standalone story, or when somebody teaches on a particular story out of the life of Jesus or whatever, it is, it's kind of they teach just on that one bit. And then we forget that all of these events were events that took place as the disciples lived their life with Jesus for 3.5 years. And I think it's important to note the ups and the downs that the disciples went through as they walked this road with Jesus, that it wasn't just a trajectory of, up like that. It was very much a trajectory of up and down and up and down and up and down. And there were many absolutely incredible miracles and things that Jesus did. Yes, of course, all the time. But then there were the times when there weren't any miracles, depending on where they were, like if they were in Nazareth. Then there were the times when they were just traveling from one place to another, the times when they were just spending time together. I think sometimes we forget about the normal life in between. So I just want to track a little bit of what was happening between Matthew 16 and Matthew 17, and then go into exactly, and also because the way things are written in the Bible, the way the stories of Jesus are recorded, there is a point behind them. The disciples, the gospel writers, the writers of the synoptic gospels understood their assignment, and they wrote their gospel from a particular perspective to ensure that people understood what was happening at the time. So it's never a good idea to read one story and just, we just take that one. It is always a good idea to read the stories on either side of it, to see where it started and where it went on from. Even if it seems to us that the stories have no connection whatsoever, they absolutely do. So we start in Matthew chapter 16. We start with Jesus, just telling the Pharisees and the Sadducees about the fact that they're a wicked and adulterous generation because they are asking for a sign. And there he is in front of them, the actual sign. There he is. And, we've come out of Matthew chapter 15 where Jesus has once again fed the people. And then we come into Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus tells the Pharisees and Sadducees they are a wicked and adulterous generation. And now the disciples cross to the other side of the lake, and they have forgotten to bring bread. And then Jesus says to them, guard yourselves against the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the disciples still aren't getting it. And so they think he's saying to them, oh, my soul, why did you forget to bring bread? And he's like, oh my goodness, Jesus says to them, such little trust you have. Such little trust you have. That's not what I'm talking about. And I'm reminding you of the miracles that you've seen happen. The miracles of the 5,000, the miracles of the others. The 2 times that you've seen that are written in biblical history, that thousands of people fed supernaturally. And then it's, you need to guard yourself against the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because those religious teachings will make you forget the miracles of supernatural provision that you have seen. Now Jesus comes into the area around Caesarea Philippi, and I have taught on this a couple of times. a couple of times. And he says to his disciples, you know, who do people say I am? So there's a whole identity lesson here. Who do people say I am? And of course, Peter, being filled with the Holy Spirit at that moment, or feeling the touch of God at that moment, because the Holy Spirit hadn't been released on the earth yet, he says, you know, you are the Christ. You are the Son of God. And Jesus literally says to him, how blessed you are, for no human being revealed this to you. No, it was my Father in heaven. And you know, Peter is the one, Emma calls him the yo-yo disciple. You know, he yo-yos backwards and forwards between being really fabulous and being really not so fabulous, but gives us all hope, right? And then Jesus, because Peter has now called God a name. He has named him. There is a name covenant taking place. So this all happens, and then Jesus gives Peter a new name and says, this on this rock, and I've taught on this many, many times before, the rock where they were standing was the actual temple. It was not the temple, the shrine to the god Pan. And there was a shrine to the god Pan out in the deserts of Caesarea Philippi, and the people would come and lay their offerings at the shrine, and that the entrance to that shrine, the entrance to that cave, was known as the entrance to the gates of hell. It was actually called that by the people. So when Jesus said that, he wasn't speaking just prophetically. He was saying, you know, are we standing on top of what people consider to be the actual entrance to the gates of hell? And I am telling you that on this rock. And you know what I love about the complete Jewish Bible that I've been gifted beautifully? Can you just it's okay to have Holy Bible envy, and this is a study Bible, absolutely incredible. You know what I love about it, which I haven't picked up in any of the other translations yet? It says this: I also tell you that you are Peter, which means rock, and on this rock I will build my community. So the complete Jewish Bible doesn't actually translate that as church, because the word used is often the Greek word ecclesia, which we often translate as church, but is actually community. So the complete Jewish Bible says, on this rock I will build my community. And when I read that, it was like this, yes, we have been saying that, you know, on this rock, Jesus is saying that he will build his church. And when we think church, we think religious man-made institution. We think of all our religious man-made structures. But actually, if you translate it as, on this rock I will build my community, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. Because when you're in community, when you're in true community, when you have found your tribe, the gates of hell cannot overcome, because you stand together as a community, not as a church just bound by a structure, but as a community bound together by covenant, by the heart of God. It's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. And then he goes on. So now and then he tells them about giving them the keys of heaven. So the gates of hell will not overcome God's community. And the keys of heaven are given to God's community. So we get to use those things when we live in community. When we actually live in a space where we demonstrate our love for each other. And remember, Jesus wasn't talking about some pie-in-the-sky utopia. He had walked a road with these people for how long? He knew what they were like. Community is messy. He knows community is messy. It's okay. It's okay. But we have to be mature enough to deal with the messiness of community. So, from that time on, Jesus starts to tell his disciples about the fact that he's going to be crucified, okay, which they don't just get, because Peter takes him aside. So 5 seconds earlier, Peter's been, praised by Jesus for hearing about that Jesus is the Son of God. And like 6 seconds later, he's rebuking him and telling him to get behind me, Satan, because he's been an obstacle, because he's just being Peter. Okay, so then he tells everyone And this is how the complete Jewish Bible puts it. If anyone wants to come after me, Matthew 16, verse 24, if anyone wants to come after me, let him say no to himself, take up his execution stake, and keep following me. Oh my goodness, yes. Okay. Now, so 6 days, so now we're moving, so this has all happened, okay? 6 days later, we're now moving into Matthew 17, and Jesus takes Peter, John, and James up a high mountain privately, and they experience the whole transfiguration. Okay, so can we just summarize? They have stood on top of the physically named gates of hell. Jesus has told them that his community of those who love him, the gates of hell will not overcome them. He has also told them, he has been revealed as Jesus Christ, as the Son of God. He has told them that he is going to be crucified, that he's going to have to suffer for them. He has given them the keys of heaven. He's reminded them about the miracles that have happened in terms of supernatural provision. All of this has happened. Now they go up the mountain and the transfiguration happens. So they actually see the transfiguration happen, which is absolutely incredible. They come down the mountain. They come down the mountain. And the man comes who has the son who is an epileptic. So remember, Jesus went up the mountain with 3 of his disciples. So the rest of his disciples were left at the bottom of the mountain. And the man brings his epileptic son. And he then asks the disciples to help, and the disciples can't help him. And so he brings him back to Jesus. And Jesus says to them, perverted people without any trust. These are his disciples he's talking to. The rest of the balance of the 12. Perverted people without any trust, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him here to me. I mean, for people who say, who just portray Jesus as meek and mild and, just never harsh, never, I don't know, but those words are quite harsh. How long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? He rebukes the demon, and the demon leaves the boy. And then the disciples say to him, why couldn't we drive it out? And he says, because you have such little trust. You have such little trust. You don't even, then he tells them about the mustard seed, and he's basically saying, you don't even have trust the size of a mustard seed yet. And then they start making their way to Galilee, and Jesus says to them, again, he speaks about his betrayal. And then they come to Capernaum, and the collectors of the half shekel come to Peter. They've obviously separated. Jesus is at home now. Peter is out there, and ask about the temple tax. I just want you to pay attention to the highs and lows of those 2 chapters. The highs and lows of those 2 chapters, because I think sometimes we think that our lives as Christians should be one complete high, and often we struggle as Christians. We struggle with, going to meetings, getting together as community, seeing God move in the most amazing ways, seeing the sick healed, seeing people delivered, seeing supernatural provision, all of the things. And then we come home and we have to wash dishes, and we have to clean up after our children, and we have to do our admin. For all those people who hate admin, put up your hands. We have to do our admin, even though we hate it, and often for us, I think we can just sit there and we can just be like, oh my goodness, but this isn't spiritual. This is not spiritual, they're practical things that have to be done. They're bills that have to be paid. They're kids that have to be looked after. There are children who have car accidents. There are, there's admin that has to be done. There is organization that has to take place. All of those things. And I think sometimes what we struggle with is the kind of the divide between the anointing and seeing God move over here, and then this very practical. But if you look at this journey that the disciples have taken with Jesus, where they've gone up onto the mountain, they've stood above the shrine to Pan, above the very gates of hell. God has said to them, you know, they've recognized, Jesus has been recognized, and it has been verbalized that he is Christ, that he is the Son of God. And Jesus is like, the gates of hell will not prevail against you. And, you know, you have been given the keys to the kingdom. You have authority to bind and to loose. All of those things have been spoken over you. And then he has to call Peter. He has to rebuke Peter a little bit. And then, you know, then they have to, then they learn that Jesus is going to suffer. Then they go up onto the Mount of Transfiguration and they see Jesus transfigured. They see him glow like Moses glowed. Not only that, but they see Moses and Elijah come down out of heaven and stand with Jesus. They see this happen before their eyes. It's the most incredible, supernatural, mystical experience. And this is often the case, I think, with people who tend more towards the mystical side of the Christian experience, or who would like to tend more towards the mystical side of the Christian experience, and assume that if you are a Christian mystic, or you live more in the mystical side of the Christian experience, that you spend your days then up in the galaxies fighting off asteroids and things like that. And then you don't understand why you still have to, you know, nag your kids to make their beds, or wash the floors, or clean up after the dog, or whatever the case may be. And we try and live in this space where we feel like these two parts of our lives are opposite, and there's this kind of disconnect between the way we think our spiritual life, or we would like our spiritual life to be, and the practical side of actually living in this world. And then we are, you know, confronted with when we miss something, or we do something that isn't quite right, or we do something where we think God is calling us to do that and it doesn't work out, or we are sick, or things happen, and we just are, how do we stay in this anointed, gifted spiritual space of, you know, yes, I'm up there doing the things, but here in this plane, you know, these are the things that are happening, and am I not anointed enough, and am I not gifted enough, and am I not spiritual enough, and why can I not just exist in this joy bubble? You know, well, because life isn't like that. And that is why I did the teachings on the kingdom of God, because we live in the tension between a kingdom that is at hand and a kingdom that is not yet. And within that tension of a kingdom that is at hand and a kingdom that is not yet is life on earth, life in a fallen world with fallen people who haven't chosen Christ yet, people who are living according to their own free will that doesn't benefit other people. That's just life. It is our experience here on earth. It doesn't make it less spiritual. It's just that we think it's less spiritual because somewhere along the line, particularly probably in the more charismatic type movement, we have been taught that we should just live these lives of grace and peace and love and joy and hop, skip, jump through the rose bushes and the strawberry fields and the white picket fences, and life should just be joy, 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 wonderful, 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 no issues, no suffering, no struggling, no nothing. And clearly people who preach that or teach that or believe that have not read the entirety of the scripture. You don't even have to have read the Old Testament. You just need to read the entirety of the New Testament. And when Jesus says things like, take up your execution stake and keep following me, I think we think that execution will be glorious. It will be glorious. It is glorious because it's for Jesus, but we think it will be, I don't know. I don't know what we think it will be. And we don't realize that the Christian life is one of ebb and flow. It is one of ebb and flow. And we have these high mountain experiences, mountaintop experiences. And then we feel like we have these low valley valley, desert experiences. And we think it's because we've done something wrong. We think it's because, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's stuff we have to deal with. Sometimes it's stuff we have to go through. Sometimes it's a journey God has to take us on so we can learn something, so that we can empathize with other people, so that we can learn to love more, so that we can die to ourselves more, so that we can crucify our flesh more. You know, for all of those reasons. Sometimes it's just life. Sometimes it's just stuff that happens because life happens. And we cannot think that the highs are more spiritual than the lows. And we cannot think that it's because we are disconnected from God. In fact, in my life experience, it has been the desert experiences and the wilderness experiences where I have often felt the most connected to God. And the mountaintop experiences have been absolutely glorious in every single way. But they also, human nature is that we tend not to lean into God from that space. So then we go back into the valley, into the wilderness, and we lean into God because we have no other choice. So can you see that the disciples with Jesus, they go through all of these experiences, standing on the very gates to hell, standing on the Mount of Transfiguration, seeing all of this stuff happen in front of their eyes. And then they come down, literally come down the mountain to, oh my goodness, you perverted people without any trust. You couldn't even cast out a demon. And then they go home and have to pay tax. Do admin. Do the things that are just part of everyday life. And so here they come to this, this time, which according to some scholars happened in the month of Adar. I'm not saying that has to be the case or is definitely the case, because different scholars agree on different timings. But according to some scholars, it is that the thing with the temple tax happened in the month of Adar. So, and prophetically it fits for what I feel like God is saying for us. So they come to Capernaum, okay, and the collectors of the half shekel come straight up to Peter, because remember, they are looking for a way to trip Jesus up, to prove that he isn't who he says he is, to be able to point out to the Jewish people that he's not living this authentic life of integrity. Because rightly or wrongly, part of that was paying your temple tax. And whether Jesus agreed or disagreed with the temple tax, what does he say? To avoid offending them. To avoid offending them. Why? Why? Because, and this is not, Jesus isn't preaching tolerance. He isn't preaching let's condone the way they live their lives. That is not, if somebody uses that to take it out of context and tell you that Jesus was preaching that you need to obey all the laws and the ways of the world because that's what Jesus did to avoid offending them. No, because he had literally just a few scriptures before, told them how awful they were. These same Pharisees and Sadducees. And he regularly called them, whitewashed tombs and hypocrites and a brood of vipers. So he wasn't scared of offending them in terms of calling out the truth. But in this instance, he is saying, this is what is required of us from a purely practical standpoint. Let us not offend them by not paying the tax. Let us pay the tax, because you know what? We are not going to have to find the money somewhere. God is going to provide the money. Now, what is so interesting about this? So the temple tax was a half shekel, okay? And Jesus first has a philosophical conversation with Peter about, who do the leaders collect tax from, their sons or from others? And when Peter says from others, Jesus says then the sons are exempt. And part of what Jesus was saying there is that, you don't have to pay to be a son of God. You don't have to pay your your finances. You don't have to give, there's nothing in the Bible that says that you have to pay financially to be given, to receive the gift of salvation, to receive the gift of justification. You do not have to pay financially to receive that. And if anybody has ever told you that, or told you that you need to financially pay to maintain your salvation, that is a lie from the pit of hell. Because once you have received the free gift of salvation, yes, there are ways that you have to die to yourself and crucify your flesh. And if you are incredibly wealthy, then some of those will probably be financial, but you don't pay to be saved. You don't pay to receive the gifts that the Holy Spirit freely gives. You don't pay to be baptized in water. You don't pay financially for those things. The gift of grace is free, but it's not cheap. But you pay because you give up parts of yourself that don't benefit you anyway. So it's a win-win from that perspective. So Jesus is saying, as a son of God, as sons of the kingdom, we don't have to pay to be in the space, to be a son, to be a daughter. But we will pay the temple tax because that was required by the Jewish religion so as not to offend them. What was so interesting about the shekel, and because remember what I tell you, remember what I've told you so many times, that Jesus was never, there were always levels, deeper levels, deeper layers of things, of meaning to what Jesus was doing. Always, always, always. So, here we have the shekel. Now the shekel, the shekel that was used in those days, the temple shekel, it was called the temple shekel, okay, was made or produced in the city of Tyre. Tyre, T-Y-R-E. I'm sure you've all heard of the city of Tyre. You must have heard of the city of Tyre. It's mentioned in the Bible in numerous times. The city of Tyre was a Phoenician world power. It was a Phoenician city, and it was a world power for approximately 2,000 years. And this, as an aside to everything else that we're talking about today, is just proof yet again that empires have risen and empires have fallen since time immemorial, since the Tower of Babel, when God scattered the people into, and they scattered them in, and they formed different nations around different languages. Empires have risen and empires have fallen. And as we watch in the world today the clash of empires, we do not need to be afraid. This is not something new. This is something that has happened in the world since then. The city of Tyre was a Phoenician city that had been a world power for about 2,000 years. And both Ezekiel and Amos condemned it. If you go back and read there, they both condemned the city of Tyre. And Jesus said it was an unrepentant city. And in 332 BC, Alexander the Great captured the city of Tyre after a long siege, and it never ever regained its former glory. It never regained its former glory because it was an unrepentant city. Why was the city of Tyre condemned? For pride, wickedness, and idolatry. Pride, wickedness, and idolatry. So, interesting that the temple shekel was produced in the city of Tyre. What is also interesting is that the image on the temple shekel represented Moloch, the god of death. The image on the temple shekel represented Moloch, the god of death. So, here comes the religious leaders of the day, and they want their temple tax. They want their shekel that has come out of Tyre with the god of death on the front of it. an image that represented the god of death, Moloch, on the front of it. So Jesus says, I'm not going to offend them by not paying this. We're going to pay this. But how are we going to pay this? Go to the lake, Peter. Throw out a line, Peter, and take the first fish you catch. Can we remember for one moment that Peter was a fisherman? He had fished all his life. His father before him was a fisherman. So fishing was in his family. He had fished. His father had fished. His friends were fishermen. He would have fished since he was a small boy. And he had never caught a fish and found money in it. It is a demonstration of how Peter's faith has increased. The fact that he doesn't say anything to Jesus, or if he did, it's not recorded in the Gospels. He doesn't say, you know, Lord, can we have a conversation about this? I have fished all my life. I know fishing better than anybody. I know that fish don't carry money in their mouths. I have fished for years, since I was a small boy. Jesus, do you know what you're asking here? He would be, I would imagine that being Peter, that would have been a conversation, but it isn't recorded. So we're going to assume that because it isn't recorded, it didn't happen, and Peter just did what Jesus said, what he was thinking, but he did what Jesus said. And isn't that sometimes when God says to us, go and do this, and then we say, Lord, can I just tell you, I have been doing that for years. I have been trying that for years. Lord, I am an expert in this particular thing. This is what I know. This is my area of expertise. I know this. So I'm sorry, Lord, but I don't think you quite get this. Have you ever been in this area of expertise before? I think that's what we say sometimes, and that's what we think. So you go to the lake, Peter. Throw out a line, Peter, and take the first fish you catch. Open its mouth, and you will find a shekel. Take it and give it to them for me and for you. Notice also that the fish came with a shekel, enough to cover the temple tax for Jesus and Peter. Notice that the other 11 disciples didn't storm off in a huff or have a tantrum because Jesus didn't get enough shekels for all of them. Can you imagine that happening in the church today? Can you imagine there is a miracle of provision, and the miracle of provision covers 2 people? But there are another 11 people who are also trusting for provision, and that miracle of provision doesn't cover them for whatever reason. We don't know. We don't know why Jesus only got a shekel for him and Peter. We don't know why Jesus didn't ask for enough shekels for all the disciples. What we do know is that the rest of the disciples didn't sulk, get offended, storm off, have a fit, leave that particular community and move to another community. They didn't. Nobody actually seems to really comment, because on the next moment we move on to something else. So, and Jesus doesn't seem to have explained it. He doesn't seem to have asked. We don't know whether they had all already paid their temple tax, and maybe it was only Jesus and Peter who still had to pay the temple tax. We don't know. But there was no big debate on why it was just 1 shekel that to cover Jesus and Peter, and not enough shekels for everyone else, or why there weren't, 25 shekels to buy them all lunch afterwards, or whatever the case may be. There was sufficient. And that was the point Jesus was making, because the other point Jesus was making was this. In the fish's mouth, a fish that swam around in the lake, not very powerful, sort of ready to be caught by the fishermen who fished on the lake. Not, they were used for food. That's what fish were for. They ate them. We eat them today. They weren't considered to be, enormously sort of powerful. They were just swimming around in the lake. But in the mouth of this fish was the shekel with the image of the god of death, Malach, on it. So Jesus he wasn't even bothering to earn or take from whatever people gave him financially that shekel to pay the tax. Because what he was saying, he was talking about the kings of the earth. What do the kings of the earth collect? And in this case, it happened to be finances, but the layer of meaning was deeper than that, because the kings of the earth were also the other kind of demonic entities, or the kingdom of darkness that likes to think it rules. The other demonic entities that the Israelites gave power to. And here Jesus is saying to the God of death, you are so under my feet that your image is on a shekel in the mouth of the fish. Like, I'm not even going to go and take that particular shekel out of our offerings we've received from people. Or the people who financially supported them or gave towards Jesus. I'm not even going to bother to take it. I'm saying to you, Malach, I'm saying to you, God of death entity, that you are so far under me that shekel is coming out of the mouth of a fish. And you, Malach, the God of death, will bow your knee to the Son of Man, to the Son of God, to Jesus Christ. You will bow your knee to me. Even in this scenario, you will bow your knee to me. And there was this layer of meaning in what Jesus did. Because in everything he did, when he did a supernatural miracle. So if you receive, and this is the word that I felt God was speaking about this morning, that we need to look, if you look at this what happened here purely from a financial perspective, and as the world descends into chaos, and as that affects our nations economically, and as that economic effect has an economic effect on each one of us and on our finances, and if you have any anxiety around that or fear around that, I want you to know that finances and the God of death and any death spirit that might be trying to be over your finances bows its knee to Jesus Christ. Bows its knee to Jesus Christ. And possibly for some of you, the prophetic word for you this morning might be to look for that provision, that supernatural provision that you need in unexpected places. And possibly you need to go and decree and declare over your bank accounts, over your finances, that they are God's. That those finances don't belong to you, they belong to God. And therefore, because they belong to God, the God of death, economic death, financial fear, economic fear, has no hold over them, because way back when Jesus walked the earth, he said to Malach, the God of death, you will bow your knee to me, to the degree that your image will come on a coin out of the mouth of a fish that has been hooked and reeled in by my disciple. Your image, Malach, God of death, will be on a coin in the mouth of a fish that has been hooked and reeled in by my disciple. That is how far you will bow your knee to me, Jesus Christ. A disciple whose name had been given, who had been called the Rock. when Jesus had spoken about a community that the gates of hell will not prevail against, that had seen Jesus transfigured, that had seen Moses and Elijah come down, that same disciple who had doubted, who would still let Jesus down in the future. But he was the one who reels in the fish, hooks and reels in the fish, and says, you know what? So for us, that sounds unnatural. For Peter, it was definitely unnatural, but he was doing something that was natural to him. Fishing was natural to him. But there was the supernatural occurrence because Jesus was reminding the gods of this world, small g, that they had known that even though he was going to die on the cross, it was because he would give up his own spirit, not because they could kill him. Because they couldn't kill him. Jesus gave up his spirit on the cross. They couldn't kill him. All the demonic forces in the world couldn't kill him. So this is just a reminder. Yes, I'm going to go to the cross, but not because of you, Malach. Not because you have power over me, because you will bow your knee to me. So let us just remember that. Let us remember that continuously, that God is the only God. And any death spirit has to bow its knee to God. In Jesus' mighty name. I feel like there's so much more to that story prophetically, so maybe we'll have another look at it on Friday. I'll just pray about that. But it feels like there's just more that God is saying there. So we'll be back on Friday morning at 7 a.m. Love you. Bless you. See you on Friday.